In 1987, October, November, around that time, I arrived in New Delhi from the United States, and I was 22 years old, and I'd never been to India, so it was a mighty culture shock for me in all aspects of that word. Anyways, I arrived in Delhi, and I was in Delhi for 2-3 days, and after that I trekked up to Dharamsala. And Dharamsala is about 13 to 14 hours by bus from Delhi north into the mountains, and that is where the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan exiled people live. And they call it Little Lhasa because, well, they have painters there, restaurants, statue makers, they have wood-carvers, they have Tibetan schools, they have Tibetan opera, dancing, they have everything there. I mean, the Tibetan culture is kind of transplanted there, and it is surviving in Dharamsala. And with His Holiness the Dalai Lama living there, it just became Little Lhasa. So I went up there specifically with the intention of getting ordained as a Buddhist monk from His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself. Because while I was back in the U.S., I had met His Holiness, and I requested him to become a monk, and he agreed, and he told me to come to India. And that's what I did. So when I arrived in Dharamsala, I had left Geshe-Tulam Gyaltsen Center in Los Angeles, where I had lived for about 8 years. Geshe had brought me to the airport with some of his close students and put a kata around my neck and gave me his blessings and sent me to India, and here I am in Dharamsala. And in Dharamsala, I stayed in this place called Ganden Sharte Shabden Khan. What it is a branch monastery of Ganden Sharte in South India, which is the monastery that I was supposed to join, and I am a part of now, and which I joined later. And so I stayed up there in their guest quarters and registered with the Tibetan office to become ordained with the Dalai Lama. They had told me that I have to find 2 more people who want to become monks, 2 more people, so that His Holiness can ordain the 3 of us. And I did. I eventually found 2 more people who also were wishing to become monks, and we got together, we requested, and so we were very lucky. And while I was waiting for my ordination, we waited about a month and a half, 2 months, about a month and a half, 2 months. I got my robes ready, I learned a little bit of Tibetan, and I stayed in the Ganden Shate Shabden Khan in Dharamsala. And this is like 15 minutes walk away from Dalai Lama's palace, which is incredibly close. And sometimes we stand on the road and we get a glimpse of the Dalai Lama driving by. That was really nice. Next door to Ganden Shate Shabden Khan was the house of a very renowned lady, doctor of Tibet, and her house name was called Deki Kankar. So we stayed right next door to her. And what she had next door was herself, her husband, her kids, her staff, her clinic, her medicine making facilities. She had her, living room, and then her guest area, and basically a room where she would diagnose people and also treat people. So that was like right next door. You have to understand, I was 22. I didn't really understand the significance of it that time, but what's very interesting about her is, you could read in the story below, but a short synopsis is that she basically escaped from Tibet, and she comes from a long line of doctors that was blessed by Atija. And Trigyu Rinpoche discovered her working on the roads, as a refugee, and helped to reinstall her as a doctor, and she became very famous and very well known, and she became a very renowned doctor. And so she's living right next door, and every single day I would look outside my window, and literally I would see 3 buses of Indian people coming from all parts of India coming to see her. So literally, outside my window, there's a parking area, and there will be 2 to 3 buses every single day, loads of people. And she started clinic at 9 a.m. and she'd break for lunch for about 1.5, 2 hours, and then she'd continue working and diagnosing people till 9 p.m. So every single day, except I think Sunday, if I remember correctly, she'd be in her clinic and she'd be diagnosing and seeing people, which was packed. 12 hours a day, sometimes longer. And I'd watch this. I'd watch a procession of people going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, every day, all day, the whole time I was there for about 1.5 months. And sometimes I'd walk by her house. I mean, it was inevitable because, we're sharing the same road from where I'm staying. And I'd see her. She's a heavy-set woman wearing a Tibetan chupa with an apron. And she has her hair tied up in the back with her Tibetan jewelry. And very graceful, very aristocratic, and extremely, to me, beautiful-looking lady. And I'm talking about a beauty that comes from knowledge, spirituality, and calmness, and compassion. Every single day, she would be doing prayers and offering of sang, which is incense from her house, which I saw. And then she would have breakfast with her husband. And then she would go to her clinic. And sometimes I walk by, I kind of wave at her, but I didn't really know her. And so I didn't think much. I just thought, wow, great. And I didn't know anything about Tibetan medicine. So anyways, one day, after a few weeks of being in Dharamsala, I had some pus come out of my lower regions, from my male lower regions. And the pus was kind of smelly, and it was yellowish, and I didn't know what it was. And so I went to another doctor nearby. His name was Yeshi Dunden. He was a male doctor, and he was supposed to be the doctor of the Dalai Lama previously. And so I went to his clinic, and the clinic was empty. There was 1 or 2 people there. It was a big clinic. It was empty. And I didn't want to go to the lady doctor's place because I was kind of embarrassed. I didn't want her to strip me and take a look at me. So I went to the male doctor thinking it would be safer. Oh boy, was I wrong. Anyways, I went to Dr. Dunden's, and he stripped me and he looked at my lower part, and then he made this kind of tisking sound, and he said to me, "Oh, shame, shame, you've been a naughty boy." And I said to him, "What do you mean?" He says, "Oh, you have a venereal disease." And I'm like, "What?" I told him, "I have not been with anyone. I'm going to become a monk." He says, "No, you have to tell me the truth. You've been with someone, maybe even more, and you caught this from someone." And I said, "No, I have not been with anyone." He says, "Why don't you tell me the truth?" I said, "I am telling you the truth." He says, "Okay, if you don't want to tell me the truth, I'm just going to have to give you a general Tibetan medicine to take." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I put on my clothes, and he gave me Tibetan pills. You take 3 in the morning, 2 at night, 2 in the afternoon, 3 at night with hot water and all that stuff. And I was like, I didn't feel good because I know I don't have that. So I said, okay, no choice. I went to the lady doctor's clinic. I'd never gone there before. I mean inside, and I went to the lady doctor's clinic, and I walked in, and luckily there was a break. So I introduced myself, and I told her where I'm from. And she spoke okay English, very, very intelligible English, and very gracious. And I sat next to this incredibly grand, aristocratic-looking lady in her traditional clothes with her hair tied up with her Tibetan jewelry, and she just looked like some kind of aristocrat. And her clinic was not very big, but it was medium-sized. And there was a lot of waiting area, and then she had a chair next to her desk, and behind her she had a huge portrait, oil painting of Trigyu Rinpoche. And I was like, wow. And I said to her who I am, where I'm from, and what I'm doing in Dharamsala, and that I'm going to be a monk and all that. And she was very happy. And she talked a little bit more because she was a little free, and she told me that this is her clinic, and she told me she makes her own medicine, and once a month she goes up to the mountains with her husband. They have a jeep, and they collect the herbs and flowers, and they come back and they dry it and they compound it and they make their own pills. Everything's made on premises with no chemicals. And she says that they're consecrated with pujas and prayers and meditation. And she said that her line of medicines come from her father. And I was totally impressed. And so I asked her, why does she have Trijanji's picture behind her? A big portrait. And she said, well, people come to me for healing of the body. While they're here, they'll see Trijanji be healed of their mind. So she said, we work together to heal people. I was so impressed with that. So she asked me, what's wrong with you? And I said to her, well, I have this problem. And I told her. And I was waiting for her to strip me. I was embarrassed. And she didn't. She took her delicate, aristocratic fingers and touched my wrist and felt my pulse. Because in Tibetan, they take pulse readings to see what's wrong with you. And through the 3 major pulses, they can accurately diagnose what happened to you, any operations, any diseases. They can diagnose what is wrong with you now, and they can even diagnose how long you will live and how strong your life pulse is. So she diagnosed my wrist, and I asked her, do I need to strip? She said, nope, everything's in your pulse. And I was so relieved. And she said to me, there's nothing wrong with you. Your body's very fit. And I said to her, do I have venereal disease? She laughed and she says, of course not. She goes, you don't have any venereal disease. You don't have any diseases. You're a healthy young man. She says, what's wrong is this. You come from a clean country and you're in India and you haven't washed yourself properly with warm water. You've probably been washing cold water. So you just have some kind of bacterial infection. She says, it's nothing. It's very, very, very minor. She says, do this. Go to the store and get Dettol, D-E-T-T-O-L, and mix that with warm water and wash yourself and rinse your area there with Dettol. She said, within 3 days it'll be fine. I said, any medicines? She goes, no, you don't need any medicines. I was like, okay, thank you. And then we talked a little bit more. She gave me some tea, and then we became kind of friends, if I can say that. And I left. So the first thing I did was I walked to the edge of the road, and it's kind of a precipice because we're on Dharamsala mountains, and I threw Yeshe Dunda's medicine over the precipice and said goodbye. I'm not taking it. And I went to the shop and bought Dettol, and I went back and I told the monks at the guest house at the Gandinshati Shabden Kang guest house that I needed warm water. So they showed me how to heat up the water, and I took a bath and I put the stuff inside the water, and after I washed, I rinsed my private part with it. And sure enough, after 3 days, the pus, the emissions, and all that were completely gone. And I've never had it since. It's been about, 20, 30 years already? And I was just so amazed with this lady, where she can take my pulse and tell me what's wrong and what's not wrong. Needless to say, I never went back to Yeshe Dundin. And later I heard some things that happened to him that was a little scandalous, but let's not get into it right now. And we call this grand lady doctor. You can call her Dr. Dolma. But when you became a little closer to her, and she was a little very affectionate, you call her Amala. Amala is the Tibetan word for mother. And though she's not my mother, you can call her mother because it's a Tibetan affectionate way of calling a mature older lady. So La is honorable, Ama is mother, so you'd be saying honorable mother. So it's a very respectful way of addressing an older lady. Even if you go to the markets, you go to the stores, you go to the temple, you meet an older lady, you can always say, oh, Amala, how are you? You're calling them honorable mother. So I used to call her Amala. And she told me that whenever I'm free, come back to her clinic and hang out with her. So I used to do that. I used to go back to her clinic and then when she'd be really busy, she signaled me to sit down, and I just sit there. I'd sit there for 2-3 hours. I was free as a bird, and I'd sit there for 2-3 hours and watch her diagnose people. And as usual, there'd be busloads of people. And I remember one Punjabi lady walking in. I remember it was in the evening. It was already dark outside. It was probably around 7-8 p.m. And it was kind of cold outside, so I hung out in her clinic because it was kind of warm. There was a warmer there. And an older Punjabi lady, probably in her 60s, came in. She was wearing a Punjabi outfit, traditional. And it was tan in color. And she had difficulty walking, and she was breathing very hard. And this Punjabi lady sat next to Amala, Dr. Lobsang Dolma, and Dr. Lobsang, and she lifted up her veil, and I couldn't believe it. One side of her arm, the left side of her arm, was totally swollen to almost 2.5 times the size of her right arm. And this older lady was kind of heavy set, so her arm was already big, thick, but her left arm was swollen 2.5 times size her right arm. And she was breathing very hard, and she lifted up her shirt. I couldn't believe it. I had never seen anything like this in my life. She had a gaping, open wound that was massive on her left breast. And if you look carefully, you can see her rib bone. And it was all swollen and dripping, and it was wet. And she was crying, and she was talking something in Hindi with Amala, and they were conversing. And then after that, I remember that Amala gave her like 3 or 4 massive bags of medicine. And then the lady went off, and then Amala took care of a few other people. And then afterwards, I ran up to her and I asked her, "What was that? What's going on?" And Amala said, "Oh, sit down and have a cup of tea." I always have tea with her. And she said to me, "This lady has exhausted all of her money trying to get healed. She has breast cancer. It's advanced stage. And it's affected her whole arm. It's swollen. It's affected her walking. And the gaping hole is the breast cancer eating away at her. And she has no money for treatment." So I said to Amala, "Is she going to live?" Amala was very light. She said, "Yes, she will live. She will be fine. Her life force is very strong." And I gave her 3 months of medicine, free. I said, "Why?" She says, "If I don't give it to her, she will die, and she has no money." I said, "Wow." So Amala gave her 3 months of free medication and told her to come back to see her. Amala told me she will live and she will be fine. I just couldn't believe it. I've never seen a gaping, open wound like that in my life. And I felt the compassion for Amala. I felt the humility because, she basically is saving someone's life, and she's nonchalant about it, and she's easy about it, and she's very simple, and she doesn't hype it up, and it's just normal. And I just thought to myself, how many hundreds of people's lives have she saved in the last decade, How much people owe her? So my respect just shot up past the ceiling. I just went, wow. I'm in the presence of this lady who is extremely spiritual, very devoted to her guru, Trigyu Rinpoche. She heals people all day long. She sees people all day long. And on top of that, she gives medicine away just like that. And you have to understand, her medicine is not synthetic. She has to go to the mountains, bring it back, dry it. During certain seasons, she has to make it into pills. It's a lot of work, and she just gave it away. And she told me, I found out that she gives medicine away and things away quite often because a lot of poor people come see her. She never says no. And another time I was with her, and I found out that she had donated a beautiful, I think 2 feet size Vajrayogini statue to the nunnery nearby. She was often donating things to the monasteries and nunneries. And then she often donated robes and food to the Ganden Shate Shatenkang right next door where I was staying. Because she's very connected to the Ganden Shate Shatenkang because her root guru is from Ganden Shate, which is Trigyu Rinpoche. So there would be about 15-20 monks staying in the Shatenkang, not including me, but I was there. And she'd always feed them and give them very good food and give them bread and give them alu taka. Alu taka is like potato. And or soups or tukpa. And she sent robes to them. I saw it with my own eyes. She would send robes to them all the time. Very generous. So I kind of became friends with her, and I used to go and visit her. And one time I was sitting in her clinic. It was unusually quiet. It was afternoon and there wasn't much people there. So I was sitting in her clinic. It was just me and her. And she was having her tea. I was having my tea. And she was staring at me. And it's kind of unnerving to have her stare at you because, like, well, you feel really small. And there's this really grand lady looking at you. And just staring at you. And kind of like, I don't know, she looked like she's just intently staring. So I said to her, Amala, what are you looking at? And she said to me, I remember very clearly, she said to me, I think you are a tuku, you are a reincarnation. And I said to her, what? She says, yes. She goes, you don't look like this is her own words, okay? She says, you don't look like an ordinary monk. You look like a tuku. I said, what on me makes me look like a tuku? She says, I'm a Tibetan. We've been living with monks and nuns our whole lives. We can just tell upon sight who is different. And she said, you are a tuku. She says, you look like a tuku. I think you are. And she kept, putting her head back and forth and looking at me. And I said, what do you think my previous life was? She goes, that I don't know. She goes, but I don't think you're a normal monk. And we left it at that. Anyways, then I found out later she sells these incredible Saraswati pills. They're called Yangchen Rilbu. YANGCHENRILBU. Yangchen Rilbu. Yangchen Rilbu Saraswati pills. They're specifically to be taken in the morning, one pill with hot water, and then you do your Manjushri mantra and prayers. And together with that pill, it is supposed to move the winds in your body so that your memory becomes fabulous. Well, I didn't have a lot of money, and I went to Amala with my poor me story about being not very bright, having a bad memory, and guess what? She gave me 3 months of free pills. I was like so excited. I got 3 months of Yangchen Rilbus, I tell you. And I was like, can I take 2 a day? She goes, no, 1 a day. And I was taking it every single day. And I was so happy because there's no such thing as memory pills in America. So if you have a bad memory, too bad. But in Tibetan system, there's memory pills, and they're made by famous Amala. And I asked her, did they really work? Because I was kind of like, memory pills? She said to me, definitely they work. Definitely. So I got it. And Amala is famous for treating all monks and nuns for free. She will not take money for anything for Sangha. And she would often donate to the monks and nuns in the Dharamsala Valley. She would treat the poor for free or give them medicine. And I used to think, how does she make money? One day I had the great honor, she invited me to her house, which is right upstairs of the clinic, because she's upstairs, and she showed me her altar. She showed me her statue of Trigyu Rinpoche and Buddha, and on the right side of her altar, inside a cabinet, she had a statue of, yes, Dorji Shukden. And she pointed to Dorji Shukden, and I looked at the statue, it was all painted, I was like, wow, that's a cool statue. And she said, this is my Dharma protector. And she said to me, he gives me whatever I need to help other people. She said, recently he gave me this jeep so I can go to the mountains and bring back medicine to help people. She says, my guru is Trigyu Rinpoche, my Dharma protector is Dorji Shukden. And you know what? Okay, part 2 of Lady Dr. Lobsang Dolma. And so, anyways, I went to visit her quite often. And I realized now that I was in the presence of not an ordinary person, but an extraordinary person who was extremely spiritual, who was very devoted to her teacher, who comes from a long line of doctors, stemming back to the Tisha himself. I think she's the 14th generation or something of doctors, and who the original doctor in her family 14 generations ago was blessed by Adisha himself to administer medicine and healing. And the reason she became a doctor is because her father didn't have a male heir, and he passed everything down to her, and she memorized everything, she learned everything, and she became an excellent student of her father. And when she escaped Tibet in 1959, whatever it was, she carried the Tibetan medical tantras on her back. So she left everything behind because she couldn't carry anything. Can you imagine? And she carried the Tibetan medical tantras, the teachings by the medicine Buddha on healing and medicine on her back, and she brought it over to India. And she worked on the roads, breaking rocks and stones and quarries to make roads, to make a few measly small salary to feed herself. And her life changed when a very high Lama, very high Lama came to her area where they were fixing roads, and they all took the day off to go and get a blessing from the High Lama. And nobody knew who she was. Nobody understood who she was. Nobody knew her background, and she was working on the road, which is very bad for her fingers, because a Tibetan doctor's fingers must remain unscarred and without callus in order to have the sensitivity to feel the pulse. When the fingers are very calloused, it obstructs the feeling of reading the pulse. So nobody knew who she was. And she just heard it was a High Lama. And when she came in the presence of this High Lama, it turned out to be Trigyu Rinpoche. And so Trigyu, one person will come up, they offer kata, he put the kata on them, the next person come up, the next person come up, and so on, and that happened throughout the day. When she came up, he paused. And he extended his hand and he said to her, "I'm not feeling well. Can you please take a diagnosis?" And she was shocked. Nobody knew she's a doctor. Nobody told Trigyu she's a doctor. Nobody even knew she was a doctor to tell Trigyu she was a doctor. And there are hundreds of people online to meet Trigyu. But at her, when she came up to him, he stopped her and told her he's not feeling well. Can you take a diagnosis? She got a shock, because she has not been doing this for so long since Tibet. And so she respectfully took his pulse, and she went out to the hills to gather whatever natural herbs she can find and concoct it, brought it back and gave it to Trigyu to partake of, and Trigyu got well, and then the rest is history. How did Trigyu know this? And so later, he asked her to open up her clinic. He gave her initiations. He put her into retreat on the medicine Buddhas. And he asked her to open up a clinic in Dharamsala. And guess what? Trigyu personally gave her his money to open up the clinic. And he personally came to her land to put the first brick down so they can build her clinic. And he blessed it. So she owed everything to this incredibly saintly master, His Holiness Trigyu, and her devotions are not misdirected. And I got to meet this lady. I spent about a month and a half with her, and you know what? She's impacted me since then. She's holy, knowledgeable, beneficial, kind, spiritual, and extremely generous and very knowledgeable. Unfortunately, she passed away. Before she passed away, she stood up, sat up in bed, and did the complete Vajrayogini sadhana and meditations, smiled, lay down, and passed away. And that's incredible. And so her lineage has been passed down to her two daughters, and her two daughters are successfully carrying on her lineage in India. I have not met them yet, but I've heard that they're doing quite well. But I wanted to share this little blog post on the lady, Dr. Dolma, with you, and to express my admiration for her. And strangely, I miss her very, very much. Tsem Rinpoche.